In the mood for some chocolate? Try this ultimate chocolate cake that has a mystery ingredient. Well, it's not really a mystery because I'm going to tell you what it is. So let's dive in and find out what makes this cake so moist. First, I grease my pans. Now this is a very important part. Use butter. You can use vegetable shortening, but it won't taste as good. Make sure all of your corners and crevices are floured, and then dump out the excess. This is what's going to help your cake come out without sticking. Very important. Now, don't make the mistake that I made here. I had some leftover cake flour, and I thought, oh, cake flour is great. It makes cakes really moist and tender. But in this particular cake, I think it worked the opposite way because I've made this cake before and it was so moist. But this time it was still moist. But the cake flour, I think, took away a little bit of the moisture. Sorry, I can't even say it. So I would recommend using all-purpose flour. I actually think you could probably take this mix with the cake flour and make muffins with it, and they would be awesome. Okay, did you catch it while I was gabbing on and on and on about moisture? Hellmann's mayonnaise is the mystery ingredient. And I know there's some people who don't like mayonnaise. You don't tell those people that you put it in there. Because really, when you think about it, what is mayonnaise? It's just oil and eggs, you know? And yeah, it just makes the cake good. So if you got some haters, just don't tell them you did it. They won't know. They won't be sorry they're eating it either. I mean, it's really good. So I'm at the part where I'm mixing it up, and it got a little smoky around there with that cocoa powder. So it's kind of important that you alternate your water and your dry ingredients just so that it's easier to mix. And don't be surprised if there's like a little thin coating of cocoa on everything, but hey, chocolate covered isn't bad, right? Okay, after you get that all mixed together, go ahead and pour it into your pans and pour it as evenly as you can. And then while it's baking, you can make your delicious icing. However, in this case, I decided to make this cake the night before, and I wrapped it up in plastic wrap, and then the next morning I made the icing. So that's what you're seeing here is me unwrapping the layers. Usually I would level a cake a little bit so that it was flat and smooth, but these cakes were a little bit low anyway, so I didn't really want to level them or cut any of the excess off. So I just went with it, and you know, I wasn't worried about it because it's a vintage cake and it doesn't really matter if it's perfect, right? I just kept thinking about that Bill Knapp's chocolate cake. Anybody remember that one? It's always a little lopsided, and it was so tasty. And that's kind of what this reminded me of when I ate it. And you know what? Nobody cared if it was lopsided because it was delicious. It just adds character, I think. Anyway, there's the cocoa cloud again. So this time you're alternating milk, and if you have whole milk, that's the best. You could even throw a little creamer in there if you wanted to. That's just going to make it really rich. And even though it looks dry and crumbly right here, when I get to the end, you're going to see it was so smooth, and cream will actually make it silky smooth. But this wasn't bad, and I used 2% because that's what I had. And I'm going to give you all the ingredients and everything in the description, but you know, sometimes measurements, unless you're like weighing out your ingredients, sometimes they don't come out quite right. And in this case, I tasted it towards the end and felt like it needed a little bit more sugar and a little bit more milk, and that's what I did. And you know what? If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. Just make sure you're tasting, is my point. This is my new KitchenAid mixer that I bought. I really would have loved to have had one of those cordless ones, but man, they're expensive. This one wasn't too bad, and it had a little storage container with it. The only thing is, it only came with one beater. It came with like a beater and a whipping tool for whipped cream. So I've had to use my old beaters so that I can have two beaters when I'm mixing stuff, because otherwise it takes forever to get the stuff blended. I don't know why they did that. Anyway. Okay, so here's my smooth icing, and I'm just cleaning up the platter, getting ready to ice the cake. And here's a little cake decorating tip if you don't know it already. Put a little wax paper or parchment under there, and then you don't mess up your beautiful platter that you're putting your cake on. You can just pull those out at the end and no mess. So just look at that icing. Look how smooth that is. And it's so much fun to ice a cake with this buttery, soft icing. I had a few visitors while I was making this that needed to have a taste, and that's okay. I understand that. All right, so here was my next layer. Now, when I laid it on top, there was a big gap, so I turned it over. Don't be afraid to do that. And there was a little bit of crumbs on the top, but otherwise you couldn't tell. So I just used a little extra icing and covered those crumbs up so that they weren't obvious, and it looked much better. And that way there wasn't a huge gap between the layers that I had to fill with icing. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wow, she's putting a lot of icing on there. Well, you'd be right. I like icing, and it actually makes it easier to ice when you have a little bit more on the top. You can just pull it down on the sides and smooth it, and you don't have to worry about getting it on the pie plate because you have the parchment paper there. And then if there's any excess and you think it's too much, you can scrape it off, but it's always better to do a little bit more. It's just easier to move the icing around on the cake. And in the end, it actually was proportionate to the cake because it was a thicker layer on the top and side, but overall, it went with the thickness of the cake. I don't know why, but I just have this like childhood core memory of chocolate cakes in children's books, and they always looked so delicious. And for some reason, I just always think of that. Like whenever I think of having a cake or a birthday cake, I always think of those delicious chocolate cakes. And you know what? This one doesn't disappoint.